Well, hello YouTube, it's me, Fortmaster, and welcome back to another Alex Bale theory. And not only any Alex Bale theory, it's a literally brand new Alex Bale theory. To get a few things out of the way, I know that, I'm kind of skipping over a couple of theories. I know, again, there's the 8 mini SpongeBob theories. There's also, an Avatar cabbage salesman theory, that I only just learned about yesterday. And I'll be getting both of those two, but this is, a literally brand new theory that at the time of recording only came out 20 hours ago. And on top of that, it's a Blue's Clues theory, which, if you go back onto my channel, I did a reaction to a film theory episode about Blue's Clues, kind of talking about how Blue was potentially like an alien that was placed on Earth to grow stronger before conquering or something like that. It did relatively well for my channel at the time, but today's video by Alex Bale, I have a feeling is going to be even weirder than that one, because this is why Blue's Clues is a fantasy inside of Law and Order. So, I know that my family, at the very least, when I was younger, we used to watch a lot of, like, cop shows and, like, those, like, procedurals, investigation shows in general. So, because, like, we used to watch Fringe, House, Bones, we watched Blue Bloods for a good while. We never really got into Law and Order, though that being said, they did, I think, this year start a Law and Order that takes place in Toronto. So we did watch a fair bit of that when that first came out, and, it's pretty good. But Blue's Clues is a fantasy inside Law and Order. So the only way I can think of this is that, like, the entire show of Blue's Clues takes place inside the head and imagination of either, like, somebody who's criminally insane, or a detective that went insane, or something of that, like, flavor and caliber. Because otherwise, I have no idea how you get these two pieces to mesh. Besides that, so besides the fact that it being like some sort of hallucination in the mind of, like, either some injured cop or criminal or something like that, I have no idea how this could go. So I'm just going to get into this reaction then. Of course, as always, original videos linked in the description if you haven't seen it for some reason. Corner video link to my Let's Play of the day. And with all that out of the way, let's get this thing started then, shall we?
Hi there! Blue's Clues is an educational children's TV show about a man named Steve who lives in a magical world where he spends his day talking to inanimate objects, jumping through picture frames, and trying to find clues to help understand his magical blue dog.
I know, Alex, him being a filmmaker at heart, he usually goes, like, pretty far and pretty, like, into these videos, but I gotta love the fact that he even went out and got a pretty authentic recreation of Steve's shirt. Like, man, where do you even get something like that? Also, what is he holding? Is this a mic or a broom? Oh, literally, you can just get it on Amazon. Wait, men's detective? They call this a detective shirt? Detective Steve, really? Of course, they don't have any tall sizes. Or 4XL. This shirt would be small on me either way. Right.
Law & Order is a gritty, realistic police procedural / legal drama that involves New York City homicide detectives trying to solve murders and prosecute criminals. And
it also has an ungodly amount of spin-offs. Like, on top of, just Law & Order Toronto, like I talked about before, there was also the Special Victims Unit, and then I was curious before I watched this video, and if I pull up the tab before, there's a bunch of these shows I've never even heard of, like, there's Special Victims Unit, there's an organized crime version, Criminal Intent, UK, LA, Trial by Jury, and another show called Conviction, which I've never heard of that one before.
These two shows are very different. You cannot find two shows more polar opposite than Blue's Clues and Law & Order. And yet, despite this, not only do I believe that these two shows exist in the same universe, but I'm also going to be proving that the entire Blue's Clues show is actually just a fantasy inside of the mind of a single Law & Order side character.
Oh my god, I was correct. The entire, literally, and I'm saying this honestly, I did not watch the video beforehand. Literally, the only way I could ever imagine Blue's Clues being in Law and Order was if it was in somebody's head.
Yes, I am being serious. I know that sounds crazy, but just stick with me, because I'm pretty sure that I have discovered a 29-year-old secret that has never been talked about before today. Get ready, because this is the Blue's Clues Law and Order theory.
Oh, this is so weird. Oh god, I really hope, for both Alex's sake and mine, that the intro theme doesn't get like content claimed. Dream theory. It's always a dream, isn't it?
The most common type of fan theory is the dream theory. The idea that everything happening in a story is actually all just inside of a character's head, whether they're stuck in a coma, or they're dreaming, or hallucinating, or they're actually dead. Pretty much every piece of media has some kind of dream theory. And it's sort of the lazy, low-hanging fruit of fan theories. You can just apply it to literally anything, and usually there's never actually any
He's actually
evidence besides,
dead.
"Whoa, this show is so crazy and unrealistic. That must mean it's a dream." And
well, you know what's even funnier than, with Adventure Time was the fact that, ironically, what's actually happening in the story is a lot darker potentially than just saying, oh, it's all a dream in like a hospitalized Finn's head, because Adventure Time is actually post-apocalyptic. And the weird, like, funny and goofy creatures are all like the descendants of mutants caused by like the Great Mushroom War, as it's called in universe.
surprisingly, the show that seems to have the most of these types of fan theories is Blue's Clues. You got
of course.
Steve is actually schizophrenic, Steve is actually in a mental asylum, Steve is actually a drug addict, Steve is actually in prison, Steve is actually a murderer who killed his parents. Oh my god. Even I made a parody of these theories back in 2017.
So yeah, it's a pretty basic, normal kid show. Steve, a 30-year-old schizophrenic who killed his parents, pretends to be a kid.
You know, that was before I dedicated my life to making fan theories about kid shows. And look, I understand the appeal of these types of theories. It's fun to take something innocent from your childhood and give it a dark, edgy plot twist. That's kind of literally my job right now. But why are there so many of these theories about specifically Blue's Clues?
Well, I mean, for one, Blue's Clues was a major cultural touchstone for, for a huge number of people's childhoods. And going into the whole, dream theory or something, as, stated before, dream theory is like the lowest possible hanging fruit when you have a show that's wacky and out there. Like, oh, it's all a dream. So it's not really that strange that when you have a show that was so popular with so many children, that eventually a large portion of them would eventually, at the very least, if they're even trying to theorize at all, would just go for the lowest hanging fruit and say, hey, in universe, it was all a dream.
Well, I think it's because everything about this show has always felt fake. Steve is the only real person in this world. He looks like a young adult, but he acts like a...
God, I completely forgot about how they did that, where he's like walking on the spot, not even lifting up his legs, and then the background just moves behind him. Oh, God.
Child, and he lives alone in a house where he spends his day jumping into picture frames or talking to unseen voices or inanimate objects. It just kind of sounds like I'm describing someone who is experiencing some kind of false reality. Even the way Steve moves around is strange. He never actually leaves the room, he just kind of pretends to walk in place while this fantasy world moves around him.
Yeah, he doesn't leave the room leaves him. What does that even mean?
Come on.
Obviously that was more of a filming limitation, but it still adds to this feeling of fakeness. But other than these surface level weird vibes the show gives off, there's never actually been any strong evidence to prove one of these theories.
So thinking about it, when did Blue's Clues start? Because I have like vague recollections of watching it, but for me, I was very much a Thomas the Tank Engine kid. So I don't have that many memories of watching stuff like Blue's Clues or Barney or stuff like that. How old was I when the show started? 1996. Geez, okay, yeah. So I was literally a year old when this came out. Okay. Yeah, so I guess it would have been something I would have watched as a kid.
And believe me, I and others have looked. It has been 28 years since this show first came out. You know, you'd think if there was actually some kind of smoking gun here, we would have found it by now. But what if that's because we've all been looking
in the wrong place?
So, the other day, I stumbled upon an interesting piece of Blue's Clues trivia. A year after Steve Burns filmed the Blue's Clues pilot, he had a small role in an episode of Law and Order. And I thought the idea of seeing Steve from Blue's Clues in a gritty, realistic cop show was kind of funny, so I decided to track down the 1995 episode titled Cruel and Unusual. Just a heads up, this episode deals with some pretty serious subject matter, so please proceed with caution. In this episode, Steve Burns plays a kid with autism named Kevin Jeffries.
Good morning, how are you?
Great.
What time is it?
10:15.
No, it's 10:18.
We learn that Kevin has trouble communicating with others and often harms himself. So his parents sent him to live in a children's behavioral clinic.
Just what was the behavioral clinic doing for him?
When Kevin was 10, he started to hurt himself.
We didn't know what to do. We couldn't keep Kevin here. We had to send him away.
We later find out that the doctors at this clinic were horribly mistreating him by giving him intense electroshock therapy and forcing him to wear a sensory deprivation helmet for days.
Yeah, why try to fix the problem when you can just make it worse?
Kept Kathy in this helmet for 3 straight days. This helmet cut off the blood supply to our daughter's brain.
The episode starts with Kevin after he's escaped from the facility, but tragically he gets arrested and later succumbs to the injuries sustained from his abuse and dies.
I don't know, Mike. I think the kid's dead.
And the rest of the episode follows the detectives investigating his death. So yeah, this is a very sad and serious episode, and it deals with some real systemic issues that are still a problem today. And like I was saying, this show is clearly very, very different than Blue's Clues. But what I find interesting about this is that for years, people have been trying to prove that Steve is actually in prison or a mental facility, and now we have this piece of media where we see Steve's actor in that exact position, and as far as I'm aware, no one's ever really talked about this. I mean, sure, Kevin's not schizophrenic, he has autism, but seeing as how he was being abused and put into sensory deprivation for days where he couldn't hear or see anything, you can kind of imagine that anyone in that position might try to escape to some kind of fantasy inside of their head. So yeah, I thought this was an interesting coincidence, but at the end of the day, that's kinda all it was. Like, obviously, just because the same actor shows up in 2 different shows doesn't mean they're actually connected. But then, I took a closer look at this episode, and I started to notice more and more weird similarities between Kevin and Steve. At first, it just started with some little things. We are told by Kevin's parents that he was learning to draw.
Thanks to him, Kevin was learning to draw.
And in every episode of Blue's Clues, Steve draws in his handy-dandy notebook.
Our handy-dandy?
Notebook.
Notebook. Let's draw a rectangle, and there. Cheese.
Okay, so just it's kind of a side, this a little side thing I'm noticing here, and I'm looking at like these old episodes of Blue's Clues. And can I just say that I never noticed, just like, even for something this old, just how well it was made. Like, you look at Steve and it's quite obvious that he's like doing nothing but, you know, standing on like either like a soundstage with like a blue screen or something like that, or not a green screen given that, you know, his shirt. He is cut out, like it is masked out so, like, he is masked out so well, and the actual like, quality of the backgrounds and stuff he's in, like, of course, they're made to look fake. They're, you know, they're not trying to go for realism at all with them. But the actual quality of them is, like, actually really good. I know that, you know, sometimes with some people, they always call, like, children's media or stuff like that, like, why even try? Kids are going to forget it anyway. But it's stuff like this. It's stuff when you see, like, a kid show like this that actually has so much effort put into it. It looks really good.
Okay, but so what? Lots of kids like to draw. But we are also told that when Kevin harmed himself, he was strapped to a chair.
We put them in a chair, and then we hold them there using soft cuffs.
And in every episode of Blue's Clues, Steve spends a lot of time in his thinking chair.
We're ready to sit in our
thinking chair.
Now that we're in our thinking chair, let's think.
And then, when Kevin escaped the facility, he kept asking people what time it was.
What time is it?
10:15.
What time?
How you doing today, huh?
What time?
Now, it is common for some people with autism to rely on specific schedules or routines, but what time it is also really important in Blue's Clues.
Yeah, I mean, just going to that whole schedule thing, I mean, Asperger's right here. I mean, I've always felt good, you know, keeping to a schedule. I hate being late, though I think the late thing was always much more just because, like, in elementary school, I don't know, thinking back, I completely forget why, but we were late a lot of the times in elementary school. I literally have no idea why, thinking back. We were just really slow.
What time is it?
What time is it now?
Steve has a cleanup time.
We just had cleanup time.
A nap time.
It's Blue's nap time.
Now it's time for so long. There's a talking clock. And most of all, every day, Steve has mail time.
Mail time. Hey, Blue! The mail's here!
So yeah, there's some weird similarities here, but nothing actually concrete. I didn't really start to take any of this seriously until I realized. After Kevin escaped, we are told that he went to a movie theater. And guess what he did in the theater?
Movie started at 10. He was out of here by 10 after 10. Got out of his seat, walked into the screen.
Kevin got out of his seat and tried to walk into the screen. Doesn't that sound exactly like Steve Blueska-doing into a picture?
Blueska-doo, we can too.
Got out of his seat, walked into the screen.
This kind of feels like
That's
more than a
weird.
coincidence. So this is when I first started to consider, is it really possible that Kevin Jeffries from Law & Order is the real Steve, and Blue's Clues is all a fantasy he created to escape his abusive reality? Okay, I know you're not convinced yet, and to be honest, neither was I, but don't worry, we are just getting started. Kevin's behavioral clinic is in New York City, and the one-time characters actually leave the Blue's Clues fantasy world and go to the real world, they end up in New York.
Blue's Clues in New York City? This is epic!
Also, in the very first episode of Blue's Clues, we can see a newspaper from the New York Times inside of Steve's house, strongly implying that's actually where he lives. We can also see objects from Blue's Clues in Kevin's life. In Kevin's parents' house, we see a very large salt and pepper shaker, just like Mr. Salt and Mrs. Pepper.
Hi, Mr. Salt and Mrs. Pepper.
Hello, Steve.
Hello, Steve.
And in the clinic, we can see a red bucket, just like Steve's friend, Pale.
Hello, Pale.
Hi, Steve.
Also, when Steve left the show to go to college, he left on a blue bus.
Bye.
And when Kevin escaped the clinic, in his pocket, he had a schedule for the Greyhound.
Here you go.
A blue bus.
Amtrak schedule, Greyhound schedules.
Which is also a blue bus.
It's not only that, but it's a blue bus with with 3 axles and 6 wheels. Okay, interesting. I mean, granted, unlike some other theories I've seen, I've always been like, Alex has always been very convincing when it comes to his theories and stuff like this, but like, this can't have been intentional on the creator's part, right? Like, that would be insane.
Alright, those are some more interesting connections, but you're probably still not completely sold yet, right? Well, check this out. When Steve eventually left the show to go to college, he was replaced by his younger brother Joe.
Oh, hi. It's me, Steve's brother Joe.
And later, Joe got replaced by their cousin Josh.
Hi, it's me, Josh.
And not only does Kevin also have a younger brother, but at the clinic, there is a nurse named Joe.
What's your name? Joe Garvey. Joe Garvey, you're under arrest for assault.
And an occupational therapist named Josh.
Take a look at the amended complaint. An occupational therapist, Josh Bingham, was dropped.
I think that Kevin is taking aspects from his real life, like the objects or the names of the people working at the clinic, and applying them to his fantasy. Also, this one is less impressive, but the name Kevin is also the name of the Blue's Clues UK host.
Hello out there, it's me, Kevin.
Also,
I didn't know there was a UK version of the show. Okay.
Oh, check this out. Kevin's behavioral clinic has the same initials as Blue's Clues. Huh? That one's also not that impressive, I know.
Yeah, okay, it's like you started off strong, but you're getting, progressively weaker as you go on here, dude.
No. But wait. If this theory is true, and all of this is just inside of Kevin's head, then why does the main character of his fantasy keep changing?
Yeah.
Hi, come on in. Hi, come on in. Hi, come on in.
Well, at first, I thought maybe Joe and Josh could actually just be from two different kids who took Kevin's spot in the clinic after he died, but
they continued the fantasy for him.
The clinic gets shut down at the end of the episode.
You made them close the clinic.
So they would all have to be from Kevin. But why? Well, we're told that Kevin has tried to escape from the clinic before.
Well, we called the police this morning as soon as the clinic told us that Kevin ran away. He's done this before.
So what if every time a host leaves Blue's Clues, it's actually Kevin trying to escape the clinic, and when he's inevitably put back inside,
he's done this before.
His fantasy resets with a new Blue's Clues host.
Hi, come on in. Hi, come on in. Hi, come on in.
Okay, so there is a surprising amount of connections here. You can't deny that. But it still kind of feels like we're missing something. Like, I can see why Kevin would imagine a fun, colorful world to escape his abuse, but why is Kevin's fantasy so focused on playing a scavenger hunt game with a blue dog?
Granted, I mean, I've never seen the episode, but given how abusive their practices were, I mean, when it comes to like autism and stuff like that, a lot of people have the thing that they're focused on. I mean, me, trains. But maybe for him it was dogs or the police being a detective, something like that. And I mean, the police have dogs as well, so that's another way you can play into that.
As far as I can tell, there's nothing similar to that in this episode. Well, I think to answer this, we need to take a closer look at what Blue's Clues actually is.
You play Blue's Clues.
At the beginning of the Law & Order episode, Kevin's doctor explained to the detectives why Kevin harmed himself.
It's pretty common with some autistic children. It's frustration because of their inability to communicate.
It's frustrations because of his inability to communicate. Now, autism is a spectrum, and it's a lot more complicated and nuanced than the way TV shows like this tend to portray it.
Especially a TV show from, so far back. Thankfully, it's only gotten better since then.
But it is true that some people with autism have varying levels of difficulty communicating. And I think this becomes interesting when we take a look at what Blue's Clues actually is.
Well, what story should we tell? Great idea. We'll play Blue's Clues to figure out what story Blue wants us to tell.
It's a game where you try to understand Blue, a character who has an inability to communicate. This is literally the entire premise of the show. So I think that this is telling us that Blue represents the side of Kevin who struggles to communicate with others. Okay, but where did the idea for a blue dog come from? Like I said, I couldn't find any references to dogs in this episode. The closest visual was this vaguely blue drawing in Kevin's room that I can't
that is
really
pretty
make
blue.
out, or this teddy bear that kind of had a similar pattern to Blue, but nothing really concrete, which is weird because Blue is such a major part of this fantasy. But then, I realized it doesn't matter if we can't find a direct connection, because in Blue's Clues, Steve didn't actually adopt Blue. In a flashback episode of Blue's Clues, we learned that when Steve was younger, he read a book about a blue dog.
It's a book about a puppy.
Which caused Blue to
Right, I remember seeing this one.
And I think this is also probably what happened with Kevin. We see that the Children's Behavioral Clinic is full of what we can reasonably assume are children's books. Maybe there's a book in here that also gave Kevin the idea for a blue dog, just like Steve. In fact, this idea of a children's book giving Kevin ideas for his fantasy is exactly what we see at the start of the Blue's Clues intro.
It's in a book, right.
Hi, it's me, Steve.
Every single episode of Blue's Clues starts with a stack of children's books in the real world, before going inside of a book called Blue's Clues where the episode takes place. The show literally tells us every episode that Steve's world is fake and comes from a book, and I think this real world full of children's books is actually the Law & Order Behavioral Clinic. And if this is true, that also means that there's probably a book literally called Blue's Clues in the clinic that Kevin is basing his fantasy off of. So even if we never see a blue dog or even hear the name Steve in this Law & Order episode, Kevin still could have gotten all of those ideas from an existing Blue's Clues book in the clinic. Now, the only thing that doesn't really fit with this idea is mail time.
Hello, mailbox.
Hi, Steve. Have I got a letter for you?
Sure, maybe the talking purple mailbox was just something from the book.
I mean, it could also, again, going to the whole communication thing. I mean, what is mail used for? Communicating over long distance. It might have been just some fantasy or, or a want to connect and communicate with his family again. Because, again, never seen the episode before, but I mean, like, how long was Kevin in that clinic for? Because it almost seemed like an insane asylum the way it was run. It was horrible.
But there's no way Steve watching videos of kids in the real world would be something in a children's book.
Look, it's a letter from our friends.
Hi, Steve. This is where we play with our blocks. This goes that way.
So, what are these videos? Well, the behavioral clinic is full of other children.
You want to see what a good day is for some of these kids?
So, I think these videos are Kevin's perception of the other kids. There is just an undeniable amount of connections and similarities between this episode and this show. It just really feels like Blue's Clues is all a fantasy inside of Kevin Jeffries' head. But...
And, thinking about it, I don't know, thinking about it, like, that's making me really sad and depressed now. Oh, no. Again, I mean, like, something like Blue's Clues, you're not supposed to take seriously. But at the same time, the fact that, in some world, somewhere, somehow, like, that happy little go lucky show might have been, some traumatized boy's only way of coping with his, quite frankly, sucky lot in life.
At this point, you're probably wondering, could any of this actually be intentional?
Well, again, this goes back to the whole bus thing. Like, okay, so when was this Law & Order pilot, when was this episode filmed? So, Cruel and Unusual. Yeah, so, April 19th, 1995. When was the Blue's Clues pilot? 1996. Yeah, so again, that was like, the first episode was aired 1996. So yeah, and then when did Steve leave Blue's Clues? 2001. So that episode, and yes, I know he left because, I know like in the show he left for college, but in real life he was leaving because he was losing his hair. That would mean that whoever was writing Blue's Clues at the time would have had to have been sneaking in weird Easter eggs and connections to a singular episode of Law & Order that appeared 5 years earlier, where Steve's actor appeared only for a portion of the episode because he died. like, I understand, I know I'm a big believer of Occam's razor here, and I'm having a hard time cutting through this.
Like, if this theory is true, does that mean that the entire plot of Blue's Clues was actually secretly based on this one random episode of Law & Order? I'll admit, that seems unlikely, especially since this episode came out a year after the Blue's Clues pilot was filmed.
Oh, okay, yeah, so the pilot was filmed in 1994, but the actual show didn't air until 1996, yeah, okay.
I think it's a lot more likely that if this was intentional, then it was probably just the Law & Order creators deciding to secretly connect these two shows on their own.
Again, I don't even know if that, I'm thinking, I don't know what's more unbelievable, if the creators of Blue's Clues connected it to Law & Order, not Law & Order, or if the creators of Law & Order connected it to Blue's Clues. I mean, which is weirder? I can't decide.
Maybe just because they thought it would be funny, I don't know. Or maybe it's some weird mixture of both, because even years after this episode came out, Blue's Clues does still seem to weirdly line up with it. I honestly don't know. And to be fair, this could all still just be a bunch of weird coincidences and that's it. But regardless of the creator's intent, it still works, you know? And it makes talking about Blue's Clues a lot more interesting. And at the end of the day, I think that's kind of the point of all of these edgy Blue's Clues fan theories. And this was originally where I planned on ending this video.
Oh God, where does this go?
Lingering question that was bothering me. If Blue's Clues really is just inside of Kevin Jeffries' head, then what about when Kevin died at the beginning of the episode? I mean, I guess we can just say that the entire Blue's Clues timeline takes place before Kevin's death, and if the show ever gets canceled, then we can just say that that is when Kevin died and the fantasy ended. But what if I told you we've already seen Kevin's death inside of Blue's Clues? So,
what?
I recently watched the new Blue's Clues movie from 2022 called Blue's Big City Adventure. And not only did I find even more similarities between this movie and the show,
right.
but I believe that this movie is showing us the day that Kevin died and the true end of the Blue's Clues timeline.
Okay.
How? So, this movie is about Josh, the newest host of Blue's Clues, going on a big adventure to audition for a Broadway musical in New York City.
Blue, we are definitely not in Storybook World anymore.
It's kind of what you'd...
Really? Storybook World? They couldn't have thought of a better name to call it? Seriously? You couldn't have said, at the very least, this doesn't look like home? Like...
Expect out of a modern-day Blue's Clues movie. He goes on a journey to the real world and gets lost. There's lots of wacky hijinks, but in the end, he finds his way and gets the part.
We want you to be the star of our Broadway show.
Yes, of course. Yes. What?
But if you watch this movie with this theory in mind, so many things take on a whole new meaning. The first thing that immediately caught me off guard was the opening song.
It's a brand new day.
This song is about starting the day, and Josh keeps saying, "Good morning."
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Blue.
And literally, the first thing we hear Kevin Jeffries say is, "Good morning."
So is Donovan.
Good morning, how are you?
Despite it clearly being night, we also hear this line in Josh's song.
This life is just like a beautiful dream.
This life is just like a beautiful dream. Interesting. And while Josh sings, the other characters keep telling him to wake up.
Wake up! Wake up!
It's a brand new day.
Right away, this movie feels different. Like it's trying to draw attention to the fact that this world is just Kevin's fantasy and it's time for him to leave it. Josh leaves his fantasy world to go to the audition in New York, just like how Kevin escapes the clinic at the start of the episode.
Yeah,
just like Kevin, Josh immediately seems very disoriented by the outside world. Until, of course, his fantasy starts to take over to protect him from reality. But What's interesting about this movie is that for the very first time ever, we get these little glimpses of Blue's Clues from other people's perspectives.
Don't you think so, Madam Mustard? Oh? Lovely to meet you. Whoa! Mr. Salt! Mrs.
Oh god, this movie. Oh god, it's the whole thing. It's the whole being pulled into a black hole here. Oh god.
Never am I glad to see you! Oh my god!
Like I said, this movie feels different. We learn that Josh's
Very.
audition is at 3 o'clock, and the whole movie is just him trying to find the audition before time runs out.
It's almost time for my audition. Oh my gosh. We don't have much time, Blue.
Could this be why Kevin kept asking people what time it was?
What time is it? What time? What time?
Josh also doesn't know where his audition is. All he knows is that it's in a theater somewhere.
Excuse me. Do you know the address to the theater? Which theater? I don't know which theater.
Maybe this is why Kevin went to a movie theater after he escaped, because he thought it was his Broadway audition. Now, in the Law & Order episode, shortly after leaving the theater, Kevin gets arrested and then tragically dies in police custody. But
yeah,
that's not what happens in this movie. Josh goes to the theater and gets the part.
We want you to be the star of our Broadway show.
Yes, of course. Yes.
But instead of him leaving and dying like Kevin, we immediately cut to him.
Geez, wouldn't that be like just the most abrupt ending to a Blue's Clues movie ever?
Performing the musical in a big climactic finale.
My dream is a reality.
So, if this movie really is Kevin's final escape, then what if this is what Kevin experiences as he dies?
I mean, the stage does look very bright. I mean, and they always say, you know, there's a light at the end of the tunnel.
And I can feel my world changing.
A massive final magical song where he's surrounded by all of the friends from his fantasy, the only people who ever really understood him. Even the old hosts show up for this final send-off for Kevin.
And thank you for making this a day and an adventure that I will never forget.
I'll never forget how you helped me find all those clues. Thanks again for all your help.
No, really. Now it's over. So long.
And that is sadly where Kevin Jeffries' story ends. Now, I know this final movie theory maybe doesn't have as much evidence as the rest of my theory, but regardless, I like thinking that maybe Kevin found some peace in his final moments. And yeah, I know that this movie came out 27 years after the Law & Order episode, so it's probably a stretch to say that they're still connected. Wait, is that fucking B.D. Wong?
I'm the director of Rainbow Puppy's Broadway musical.
B.D. Wong from Law & Order SVU is the fucking director of Josh's musical?
Okay, yeah, didn't see that one coming.
Not entirely comfortable labeling the suspect a serial killer.
We want you to be the star of our Broadway show.
Holy shit!
We just figured out Blue's Clues. We just figured out Blue's Clues. We just figured out Blue's Clues.
Because this is my job. This is actually my job. Alright, that is my theory. Thank you so much for watching. Hope I didn't ruin Blue's Clues for you. Hey,
no,
thanks
really.
For
I mean,
subscribers. That's really cool. YouTube sent me this big golden rectangle. So I got that now. Also, you know, Steve Burns is kind of active on the internet these days. So if by some chance you happen to see this Mr. Steve Blue's Clues, I'm sure we would all love to hear your thoughts on this theory, even if that's just him calling me crazy. I'm fine, I'll take it. I got more fan theories on the way. I'm doing a high school musical one. Maybe a Breaking Bad one. Seemed like people were interested in that. And I've got a bunch of other ideas I'm working on too, so subscribe to catch those. Make sure you hit the bell icon, because sometimes YouTube just randomly decides not to tell people when I upload. Hello, is anyone watching this video? Did YouTube tell anyone I uploaded? I hope so. Speaking of which, I recently posted a compilation of all of the Don't Feed the Muse web series episodes into one long film, and it's got a bunch of brand new content in it, so check that out if you're interested. Thank you to all the patrons who support this channel. If you sign up to my Patreon, you can get access to videos early, behind the scenes content, and your name at the end of the video. Look at all these names.
Out of all of the shows that you could have had Blue's Clues connect to, having it connect to a 29-year-old Law and Order episode and have it potentially make a lot of weird and twisted sense was not something I thought I'd be seeing. But here we are. God, so I mean, at the very least, I mean, you know, in the whatever minuscule chance that the theory ever ended up actually being true, at the very least, Kevin, you know, had a happy end in one sense of the word at the very least. So, yeah, I guess that's gonna be it for now. So, yeah, of course, as always, original videos linked in the description if you haven't seen it yet for some reason. Corner video link to my Let's Play of the day. And yeah, we'll hold that out of the way. I hope you guys liked. If you did, leave a like, subscribe if you have not, and I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.